Welcome everybody. So this is going to be our discussion over the future of training at decisions.com. I've been at Decisions for about 4 years and the training has evolved a lot. We actually started off at the way beginning of Decisions back in the day, and Kirsten can attest to this. There wasn't really a training, it was more of like, hey, this customer needs this thing built, can you go build it? And that was training at Decisions. So over the years it has transformed and become a lot more formal to help people get ramped up with what we need them to do, whether it be to build a project, whether it be to add some type of system enhancement. That's where all that comes into play. So my name is Jared Rodriguez. I've been on, as I said, in Decisions for about 4 years. I was in a lot of different departments. So I've seen the product from different angles. And so what we're going to be talking about for this course is there's going to be about 5 to 6 points that we'll be talking about. First off, since at the way beginning of Decisions, we didn't really have a training objective. Well, we're going to talk about what's the training objective. What are we trying to strive the students that you guys send through our training program? What's the purpose? What are they going to do? We're going to do a brief overview of the current training program, why we went there, and then after we talk about the current training program, we're going to talk about the enhancements that we're going to add to it. Because as we all know, Decisions is a platform that can be used for a myriad of reasons. And so training is very fun on it because there's always new things to teach people at. So after you start talking about the new training additions, we'll talk about future dev projects that we'll be adding to the dev course that teach different learning objectives. We're going to talk about higher level learning objectives because a lot of what we've been around here is we need people to create things, right? We need people to do something. Here's a requirements document. I need you to build this to help save money or whatever the case it is. And then we're going to talk about some custom training. Tony and Eric mentioned it in their class where you can have some custom IoT training, and we'll talk about how to get involved with that. So the first thing I'm going to show you guys is this thing called Bloom's Taxonomy. Now, what is this Bloom's Taxonomy thing? It's basically something that was created by this guy named Benjamin Bloom, who was a learning psychologist, who said these are the basic foundation layers that someone needs to understand to go through and create something. And so this is going to be something, just keep in the back of your mind, because we're going to refer back to this over the course of this presentation. The reason why I show this is because every customer I've talked to, every partner that I have interacted with today, you want to get your student or your worker to be able to go to the top of the pyramid, to create something. You don't want them to remember something, or do you want them just to remember, or just to understand. You want them to be able to go through the top of the pyramid. If you've ever attended a lot of my classes, I would use this analogy many times. I've watched so many YouTube videos on how to make a croissant. I see how they bake it. I see how they do all these fancy things to it. I see how they set it up. But then, you know, we haven't had lunch yet. You may be asking me, hey, Jared, can you make me a croissant? And I'll go, nope, I can't make you a croissant. Because just because I've watched something and just because I've seen something doesn't mean I can actually do it. And what you guys need for your employees is you want them to say, hey, I need you to build this thing. How do we build this thing? And so that's what we're going to be talking about. So our current process is asynchronous. All that means is that we have people who can go through our training program independently of the trainer. We transitioned to this because we have customers all over the globe, and it's very inconvenient to say, hey, I know you're in Australian Eastern Standard Time, but you need to stay on a 9-hour call from 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. your time. And so we switched it to an asynchronous model, and you can fill out this application online on the web portal to get your student enrolled, and they can go through training. I tell people this doesn't mean we don't want to talk to you. This doesn't mean that, you know, don't ever email us. Many of you have attended the training. I know I enjoy seeing your emails when you email training@decisions.com because our goal is to help you go through that training program so you can learn and create your own processes. We've transitioned the naming of this program. It used to be called Business Analyst, but now we've changed it to Product Training because we have more hands-on experience. So we're not just talking about, here's how to make a croissant. We're saying, hey, we're going to have you make that croissant. And so that's what we do here is, hey, you have some video lessons you watch. After you watch it, then you do it. And also, we have our stand-ups for Eastern Standard Time if you're in the Americas. And then also, we have an IST stand-up if your business or students are on that side of the world. So self-paced, hands-on training learning. And then our current training program, the developer course. You may be familiar with this, right? I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it should be familiar. Is you have sprints 1 through 5 or our projects 1 through 5. You build an end-to-end application. You build a data cleaning project. You build some advanced roles. You do some document handling, and then you troubleshoot the project. And you have video lessons, a task list, requirements, all that stuff that helps your employee learn this. Well, let's go back to the reasons why we did it this way. One, it builds designer competency. At the start of the objective of just that learning plan that I've just kind of reviewed with you guys, it was just to make someone familiar with how to build in the tool. So you can say, hey, can you build a flow that adds two numbers together? You won't have that person being like, I don't know what a flow is. They'll be able to know how to use the basic levels of the designer tool. Then what the developer dev course does is it shows people how to build in a business context, right? We have our Travel Splash kind of sales representative application that we send people and say, hey, this is why you're building this application this way, is because you need to approve the manager, or the sales rep has to have their travel request approved by that manager. And then through those courses, you have common logic patterns, how to use a for each loop, how you do all these basic kind of things, right? And so that's what the objectives of our program does. But what we've learned, going back to this metric that I want you to see, is the goal of training now is we need to get people to go above just remembering and understanding how to do a for each loop, how to just send a task to a manager. We need to go above and beyond that. So that's why the objective, we have that mountain climber there to represent that every addition that we make in training is going to slowly get us back up to the create part. So right, again, the objective, here's a requirements doc, I need you to create something for me, or work with the team and create that. So that's the objective. Now the question you may be asking is, okay, so Jared, where does your current training program fit? Well, here's where I believe our current training program fits. Right there on the first two levels, remember and understand. I've interfaced with a lot of students, I've talked with a lot of partners and a lot of customers, and while our training is good at getting people to understand and remember the tool and use it in some sort of way, but the difficulty is, hey, I've tasked this person to do something, and they have this like kind of deer in the headlights look at me, and they don't know what they're doing, right? So what's the next part? Well, the future training program is going to help us go up to the next level. How do we apply that knowledge? And that's what's missing. I've built this thing. How do I apply it in the context that we need it to? So with that being in your minds, I want you to remember this Bloom's taxonomy, because we'll be referencing back, and we're talking about how we're going to have your employees not only remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create things you need for your business. So what are the add-ons? This leads us perfectly in. What are those add-ons that we're going to add? The things that we're going to be adding is it's going to be twofold. We have two new learning plans that we are going to add in a way to help us achieve going up that pyramid, going up that ladder. The first one is going to be this new one called a work queue. It's going to be a learning plan that deals with a lot of heavy UI stuff, so things like dashboards, things like forms, because we do have customers, partners, and people who build in decisions where they want some heavy UI capability, where a user fills out a form, that form goes to a manager, or you may have someone go to a landing page on a dashboard, they submit a loan application, then they go through all the assignments there. And so that's a heavy part of that course where we're going to say, hey, we're going to add more to it. So that's going to be the new learning plan that we're going to be creating. It's going to be in the same format. We're not going to deviate from that format because we've seen how well it helps our students. They're not tied to a 9-hour call or an 8-hour call. They're going to watch video lessons. They'll have a task list. They'll have a requirements document. And then there will be an open book final exam. And then a trainer will grade their project to proceed them through. That's been a good format for us, and people have enjoyed that format. So we're going to continue working on that one. Then the next thing is you will get a certification upon completion. So those things will be adapted and changed to where you have one that says, hey, you're going to get certified for the Decisions Work Queue, and another one says that you're certified for the Business Rules Engine. And upon completing both, right, just because we're introducing these two new learning plans, it doesn't mean we're scrapping the old one. The old one will still be around live and well, but what we've done is, as a team, is we've looked at all those projects and identified what they teach and said, hey, here's a better way to categorize it, right? I have some people who come to me and say, hey, Jared, I know you're talking a lot about the UI stuff, but we never use any of the decisions UI in our process. It's all rules, so I don't want that. What can you offer? And I have to say, oh, well, you know, it's kind of, there is a balance. You kind of want to be, you know, generalist in all of it, but that doesn't really suit your business needs. So that's where we have this other one called the Decisions Rule Engine. So now my conversation with you isn't, well, now you have to go through all 5 weeks. Hey, no worries. We have 3 learning projects that are just rule-centric. Your students will learn how to build rules, truth tables, rule sets, conditional rule sets, and kind of go into a deep dive like Josh demonstrated yesterday. Here's how you build all of those different types of rules for your business, not just here's how you add a UI and then run rules. No, here's how you just build rules, and then when they complete that training, they'll be able to design the rules that you need for that process. So again, to reiterate, 2 new learning plans. One's going to be work queue centric. If you have heavy UI that you want, you can go through that learning plan. If you want just business rules, you have one that's just going through business rules. And upon completing them separately, you'll get your own cert. And then upon completing both of them, you'll get the Decisions Developer cert. I'm going to pause here for questions. Any comments or questions so far?
So when do we expect to have work queue with business rule engine modules?
Awesome, great question. I hope to have them launch at least either mid-June or near the end of June. Because we're still working on the prototypes of building those projects, and we're also going to have a review process with our PS team and other teams to make sure it's kind of up to standard of what we do. So probably mid-June or near the end of June is where the estimation of that. Yes?
So if someone were to start the training now, what program would they be in? Is it the same one that's just the 5-week?
Correct. It'd be the same one just for the 5-week until that moment. And I'll be working with marketing too when we launch this. It'll be an announcement that everyone can see, like, hey, we've now launched 2 new learning programs. You don't need to send people to just a 5-week. You can say, hey, it'll probably be the same learning options. So you go to the website, and instead of just being automatically enrolled in just the main 5-week, you'll have a drop-down list that says, hey, do you want decision work queues or rule engines? And then it automatically enrolls that student into that learning plan. Go ahead.
How long is the content for each one of those?
The content for just the decision work queue is about 4 weeks, and then the business rule engine is about 3 weeks.
Jared, the current program that we have, if we split those two in these 2,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of it, you would still be a decision certified developer, the current decision certified developer.
For
We're calling this add-ons,
mm-hmm.
but you're saying that if someone were to complete both of these,
Mm-hmm.
then they complete both to become decisions developer certified.
Correct.
So these 2 basically cover everything that we're doing today. It's just like if you want to go down the specialized. So you're adding on
You
to
got
the
it.
product, not adding on to the development.
Correct, yes. Still the same kind of product, we're just splitting off into, exactly, more specified. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Scott.
Is this going to be async or be instructor-led for these new learning plans?
Great question. Those will be also async. We're going to keep the same format where you log in because that's just, there's a lot of people who, they don't want to be bogged down sitting on an 8-hour call. You know, some people just want to get their hands in and start building it. So we're going to keep that same format. Go ahead, Joe.
So John's question was how long it is. I noticed we went from 5 weeks to 7 weeks. I assume there's more content, more in depth now?
Yes, we're going to be going over that through the course of the presentation. But yes, there is going to be more content, more things. Yeah, go right ahead.
So you're talking about the Bloom's taxonomy. I noticed the roadmap is that it doesn't quite go up to the create stage. Is that not what the sprints are with creating? I asked this as somebody who is
Sure.
going through the training right now, and I'm almost at the first sprint.
Sure, no, great question. Yes, so basically we're going to be working towards up the ladder right now. So our current iteration for the future program is going to get us to the apply stage. But then I'm going to show you in future slides that I have what the evaluate, what the analyze, and what the create looks like, right? And then that's going to be the future where we're going to try to head towards. So great questions. All right. So I just want to define what is a work queue. So these are just kind of mock dashboards. So if anyone is wondering why we're using that terminology, it's because it's the terminology that says, hey, all we need is someone to be able to log in to a dashboard and they see their work. That's their work queue. They're going to complete tasks, approve tasks, deny tasks, reject tasks, and that's going to be what a work queue is. So I just want to make sure that we understand the terminology here. That's what we mean by work queue. All right, here's how these add-ons fit, as we talked about a little bit with the questions. Once you complete both the decisions work queue and the decisions business rule engine, you will be able to have your decisions certified developer. Now, another thing that I've talked about before is like, what if someone is certified as a decision developer before this, and yet what if they want this learning? And the answer is they can still go right ahead and learn it. If they want to go and enroll in these courses, the LMS that we have will identify that you've completed the previous 2 courses, and you'll just see that course available for you. So don't think, oh, I missed the deadline, we didn't change it fast enough. No, if you want to see what those projects are, and we'll talk about what those projects are, and you want to learn them, you still have that opportunity to do so. It's not a, I'm going to miss out because I'm already decision developer certified. Well, look, we talked about those 2 projects. I talked to you about that work queue and the business rule engine. Well, how are we going to do that, right? What's the method and the way that we're going to teach those projects? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're implementing 2 new projects into the decision work queue. It kind of explains why one's a little bit longer. So we're going to keep Travel Splash. So it's basically what we're doing, as you can see, is that we're taking the current dev course, we're taking some of the projects and flipping it and moving it into this category. So the ones that were retained from the previous dev course is Travel Splash, which is our first application, and then our I-9 PDF generation. This is where you fill out a PDF automatically. And then the two ones that we're going to be adding is a document routing one and a loan application one. Right? We have a lot of people in the financial services, so this is one that we're going to add on to help accommodate and see how they would build something in decisions that helps them in their type of business in Vector. So those are going to be those two new projects. Well, again, what is in those two new projects? What are the skills that are going to be taught? Here is our skill matrix, and here are the list of bullet points here. If you can't read the matrix because it is a little small, is we're going to teach people how to create dashboards via landing page, right? So when someone just goes to a URL, they don't know its decisions. They're like, okay, I click this, and then I work through the forms. So that's going to be taught there, how you make dashboards as landing pages, using page variables as dynamic dashboards. That's something we haven't taught in the current program, where we don't teach people how do you make dashboards dynamic within themselves. Configuration extensions. Let's say you're dealing with a default decisions data type and you want to be able to add user right-clickable actions and customize it further. That's where configuration extensions will come in. Serialization and deserialization, we had a little bit of that in the last program, but in the loan application that we'll have here is just going to dive heavily into that, where you're going to take in a specific HTML and you're going to convert that into a PDF and then have it be dynamic and fillable. And then we're going to demonstrate that utilizing this kind of step, the end velocity step. So it's basically, that's the step that's going to emphasize all that learning. We'll define what it is, and then the students will have to use it. A lot of the skills reinforced, assignments and decisions, that's going to be heavily involved in here. Runtime selection, that's always as necessary whenever we're thinking about scalability. We want to make sure that we emphasize that. And then email template design, right? A lot of our jobs is notifying the appropriate individuals. And so we'll talk about custom merges and how to create a template of the stuff you just need to send to that individual. And then if it changes from the QA to the PS department, we'll send this, this email header instead. So that's going to be what these new projects teach. What are those projects? What's going to be involved in it? The first one is our document routing project process. This one, the idea here is the requirements document is going to be you have a business that says, hey, we have a file transfer protocol or FTP server that houses all these documents. The decision developer's job is to create a process that connects to that FTP server, gets all those documents, and then classifies it, right? So it's using a retrieval process that's getting it from somewhere else, and then it's going to classify those documents, whether it's a resume, an invoice, or an other type of document. So a document that doesn't fit in a resume or an invoice. And then what's going to happen is, depending on what those processes are, if it's a resume, it's just going to send an email back to the submitter saying, hey, got your resume, we'll reach out to you if we think you're a worthwhile applicant. Invoice, it's going to say, hey, go to our data analysts and have them enter that invoice into a decisions, and then have it sent to a manager for review. And then manager review whether the invoice is good or bad, or if it needs to be updated, the manager can submit it himself. And then if it's good, it'll be sent to accounting. If it's not, then the manager will submit his own and then send it through. Well, what happens if it's another type of document? It doesn't classify as a resume, doesn't classify as an invoice. It's this kind of other category. What do we do there? Well, there we'll have a dashboard that allows the manager to left-click on each of those documents, display the contents and what those things are, so they can say, oh, hey, this is actually an invoice. Let me right-click and say submit to invoice process, and then it kicks off the invoice process. Hey, this is a resume. Right-click, set it to a resume, and then it's going to run through the resume process. And then if it's junk, hey, store it in a folder that gets cleared after 30 or 90 days. So it's going to allow people, so it's going to teach people, one, how to classify documents, two, how to reclassify documents if they're classified incorrectly, and then kick it off to the appropriate process that it belongs to. So you can easily take in documents, classify them, and then move them around where need be. Any comments or questions over this? All right. Here's some of the prototyping of it. This is a prototyping of that dashboard that I mentioned earlier, where you're going to have people be able to view the document and be able to understand what is inside here. So for example, this is the invoices folder. So this is where the manager can see all the invoices and then work any assignments from this dashboard. All right, let's continue on. Let's talk about this loan application process. How does this one fit? What's the idea behind this one? The idea behind this one is that you're going to have an applicant that's just going to go to a URL, and it's going to have a landing page and a button that says submit your loan application. Once you submit the loan application, it's going to go through several different people, through assignments, through signing your name once the application is done, and then once it's done, then it'll be in a closed state. So just to summarize this, basically what your students will learn, or your employees will learn if they go through this program, is they're going to learn how to utilize case entities really well. Because a lot of this, because it changes states, it needs to run through different processes. So they're going to understand that very well. They're going to understand how to create a dashboard as a landing page. So if you have a process that you want someone to just click on, they can. You'll also be able to learn how to use HTML custom merges to have that specific design, the specific branding that you're looking for in your business. And then a UI-centric building, right? Everything's going to have dashboards on it for all those different users. And the objective is once a user logs in, they just see their work and they do it. There's no designer, there's no designer studio. It's just, hey, this is the work you have to complete. And so that's the goal of this loan application process. Here's a couple of prototypes from it as we're building on it. So it's going to have lots of information to fill out, and then it's going to show how to display file data as you upload it. So the one on the left I really like because it shows users the logic of how you upload a document, and then you can attach a document viewer on the same form, and then it automatically shows you what it looks like. And so it's going to teach those types of functionalities that, hey, you may want in your business. All right, that's the decisions work queue. Any questions over decisions work queue process before we go into the rules engine learning plan and what this one offers? Awesome. So let's talk about the business rule engine. Let's talk about the new one. So this one has one new project called asset tagging. And this one was, I got this idea from working a POC a long time ago, proof of concept a long time ago, where it was a financial institution that said, hey, we get data from many different instruments, from international, from domestic markets, and we just need to tag it a certain way and then transform that data and store it somewhere else. And so at the end, since this is going to be the harder of the projects, we're going to place it there. So students, as you can see, will still do insurance claim and the data cleanup because those are rule-centric ones, but then at the end, they're going to have this asset tagging project. And what is this asset tagging project going to have? The main thing that I really enjoy about this one that we're building is, one, you're going to take some formatted unstructured JSON, and you have to take that in and transform that, right? A lot of what I heard is people need to take some unstructured data from somewhere, transform that, and then after they transform that, they have to determine, hey, is this an international market? Is this a domestic market? Is this a local market? And then run it through a conditional rule set to tag it a certain way, and then transform that data and output it in a way that will be stored in an XML. So you're going to see data transform rules, tagging it, and then data transformation. And then we did throw in a dashboard because a lot of times when you are running your data through, you want to know what rules ran and why. So the only UI for this one is just going to be a rule audit dashboard so that you can say, hey, I know why this rule ran and I know why it triggered. So that's going to be the financial asset tagging project that we'll have in decisions. All right, so those are the projects. And a lot of the questions that I had earlier that you guys asked, which were great questions, is how are we going to be working up that pyramid? As you can see, all those things that I showed you, we're still only on the apply part of that pyramid. So what is going to help us to go all the way up that pyramid? Well, here's how we're going to handle teaching those objectives. Remember, right? We will start at the bottom just remembering, and we got to get to the top to create something because everyone wants to create something, which is important so that we can improve our business process. What is that? So right now, we have those two things, right? Analyze and evaluate. How do we get to analyze and to evaluate something? Analyze, in my mind, when I was thinking about this, is how do you compare two different flow or rule designs? Can you explain the differences of those things and the drawbacks, the benefits? Because as we all know, decisions is a very flexible tool, very powerful tool, and you can build it in many different ways. And what determines whether one's kind of quote-unquote good or bad is if it kind of breaks kind of these three rules that I've heard in architecture, right? Is it scalable? Is it reusable? Is it performant, right? And so you need to be able to teach students, you have to think when you build in those three ways. Is it scalable? Is it usable? Is it performant? Because that's going to determine why you build a certain way or not. And then the other way is you have to evaluate it. You have to say, I'm going to build this way and here's why. We need to have students say, here's why I built it this way. And in order to justify that reason, because then that allows us to evaluate, hey, is that really in objective of our requirement scope? Hey, is that really in line with this? But the student must be able to say, I built it this way because. Now, a lot of times what I witnessed in the current program is I would ask the question, hey, why did you build it this way? Oh, because the task list said so. And that's not really something we can evaluate on because that's not what the objective is. So that's why we're going to go up and we're going to ask these questions. You got to analyze, hey, what's the difference between these two things? And then once they understand the difference between different building options, then we need to evaluate, okay, remember the requirements document, what is the use for this? So how are we going to accomplish this? So here's an example. We can do a little fun exercise here. So what's the difference between these two builds here?
So the one on the left takes the record one at a time, the one on the right does them all at once.
Exactly. And that's a perfect example of, right, you analyze the differences between the two. We need to get students to do just that. Hey, I know why this is different, right? Oh, there you go. So, and here, right, we can do it in 3 steps, so it's a little bit more time to go through it all. Or we can do it all in one, a rule collection filter. And that's the difference. So basically what the future of analyzing going up that pyramid, that analyze part is we're going to create some type of exercises where it's going to be you have flow A and flow B, tell me the differences. They can run it, it's going to work, but they have to identify what those differences are. And then we'll have some type of grading process that says, okay, they were able to analyze and justify this, and they identified the differences between these two. Because that's the only way we can get someone to understand, hey, this is how I need to think about these processes. Now, what about this next one? How do we do the evaluate one? So let's say, right, someone can do the analyzation and say this one is built this way, this one's built that way. How do we evaluate it, right? How do we understand? So let's do this scenario. So I need to fetch about 30,000 records from a 1 million record database to pass into a rule set for evaluation. What is the most performant way to do this and why? Any ideas? There you go, yeah.
Let the database do the work.
Exactly, that's the right. We want the database to do the work. And so there's many things in decisions, query integrations, stored procedure integrations, that we can teach to have someone say, hey, whenever you're dealing with a database that has 1 million records and you just need 30,000 of them, don't pass that into a rule collection filter. It's going to be so slow and everyone's going to be screaming their heads off like, oh my gosh, this takes like 10 minutes. Well, that's where you say, hey, I'm going to teach you how to use a query integration. I'm going to teach you how to use a stored procedure integration so that you can have the most performant way to do this. And that's how we're going to climb up that ladder. And then at that point, once you reach the analyze section and we're at the create part, then you can tell people, hey, I need you to build requirements where I take in about 30 records from a 1 million database. I need you to create a dashboard that displays a section of them so that people can evaluate the rules that ran through. So that's how we're going to teach that. We're going to say, hey, and it's just going to be paragraph questions, right? Hey, here's a scenario. How would you build it? Either you can demonstrate and submit a flow that you say, here's how I would do that design, or you can write out, I would build it this way utilizing these features of decisions. And if a student knows those features of decisions, then they can build in a way that's performant, usable, and scalable, because that's kind of the 3 architectural pillars that I've heard today. Is it scalable, performant, and reusable? All right, any questions over where we're going from a training objective before we go into kind of the custom options that we will have available? All right, so a lot of why we started transitioning to custom training, or now why we're talking about it, is because this diagram kind of illustrates it perfectly. Way back when, it was always, hey, if you need training and decisions, you call decisions up, and then Eric Welmerank will just fly out to your location, give you a 5-day crash course over decisions, and that was your learning. And it was just that. No really tracking, no really metrics, no really understanding, hey, does someone really have the knowledge that was taught? So now what we're going to be doing, so now what happened was after we did that, we went to the other extreme. All right, now we're all online. You can only do it online, and there's nothing live at all. And obviously, the answer to a problem is never in the extremes. It's always somewhere in the middle. And so now what we're going to do is we have both options. If you still want to learn decisions in a way that you can be independent from a ILT or instructor-led course, you have that option to enroll on the website. And if you want some specific ILT section for your company or your business because, right, working in business, you guys are busy. And sometimes it's hard to get people to independently go through a class. So if you can say, hey, I just need 3 days of an ILT on-site to teach someone the basics of decisions so that they can build, we can be able to accommodate that as well. Tony and Eric talked about this, and so there's obviously some options where we may not require some paid ones, but there are some that are paid depending on the length of the training. I've done some trainings where someone said, hey, I just need an hour of your time to talk about forms and deep dive in forms. I'm like, no problem, typically no cost because it's just an hour long. And then we have some customers that say, hey, I need a kind of like a 5-day a week. Can you come on site or do it remote? And then those, since they're more involved and do take more time, those will typically be those paid options. But right, we're trying to grow to that point where you can get the learning that you need so you can get your team up to speed. So how do you get involved and how do you get the customer instructor-led training? The main way to do this is to reach out to your customer service manager. They'll be direct contact with me, and then we're going to have a communication as a team with them, and then you if you want the ILT option, and we'll discuss, hey, what are your learning objectives? What is the thing that you want to have so that when the training is done, we can point to and say, hey, your student now knows X, Y, and Z thing, and they can build the project that you want them to build, or now they understand this concept that you want. So, and what the CSM also has is they'll have a list of topics, and I'll show that in a little bit. But you can also try to get a unique topic of training and just say, hey, after we've identified your learning objectives and what you want, it seems like you just want to understand the conditional rule set really well. Hey, sure, we're going to do a deep dive, kind of like what Josh did for about 45 minutes to an hour, and we're just going to talk about everything about that rule, everything about that feature, all the bells and whistles, and things and reasons why you want to use one over the other. So that's going to be the purpose of that. Here's an example of those topics. So we have there's many of these different slides, and so this is very helpful for your customer service manager. So they'll probably show this to you and say, hey, I need to figure out how to refactor long-running flows. I need to understand best practices better, performance tuning. And those classes, just show that to the CSM or pick the ones you want, and then we'll talk as a team how we can get that accomplished. But that will be the way that we accomplish this ILT. And we'll be, obviously, just like everything else in the program, we'll be growing it, making it better, and trying to get people right from the bottom of that pyramid all the way to the top, from remembering to creating, so that you can have the most performant, reusable, and scalable process for your business that saves you time and saves you money. All right, questions, comments, go ahead.
So there's another instructor-led training opportunity, and that's like decision days. You offered it, these classes, and submersion.
Exactly, yes.
So there's a couple other instructor-led training options available.
Mm-hmm.
When you team it up with one of your events.
Exactly, and we'll also talk about that too, because a lot of people will say, hey, I want specific training over this, and we'll say, oh, hey, like to save you money, we already got a submersive event going on for 3 days, why don't you just join that one, right? So it's very much, the goal is, right, we want to teach as many people. Oh, you need a slide for that? Oh, you're right. Next time I'll have you review my slides, so. You'll be my slide reviewer, how's that? but good comment, good comment. Any other questions, comments? Alrighty, well, thank you for your time, and I hope you guys have a fun rest of your day and decisions days. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.